Track 34. Alexander's Triumph.
It was the third day of the Games, and the next event was the boys' pentathlon. Alexander of Argos waited with the other competitors outside the stadium. There was Stelios of Sparta, Adonis of Athens, Midas of Megara, and Corydon of Corinth. They were all the champion athletes from their cities, and they were all there to win. The first event was the discus. Adonis was the winner last year, and everybody expected him to win again. One by one, the boys took their turns to throw the discus. Each time the crowd gasped in shock. The throws were very short. Then Stelios stepped up. He raised his arms at the crowd and threw the discus high up into the sky. The crowd stood and cheered wildly. The other boys hung their heads in disappointment. Corydon had some shocking news.
I think Stelios is cheating. He changed our discuses.
Our discuses were heavier.
That's why I didn't win.
Corydon stood on the long jump line. He breathed deeply and ran as fast as he could. He jumped and swung his arms back to catch his weights. But the weights didn't move. Then Stelios ran up to the pit and jumped. His weights swung forwards, and he jumped so far, he almost jumped out of the pit.
Somebody tied my weights together. And we all know who that somebody is.
First, Stelios threw his javelin. It flew through the air as straight as an arrow and landed very far away. Corydon picked up his javelin, and he knew immediately that something was wrong. The javelin felt heavy and wet. He stood back, took aim, and threw. The javelin turned to the right and fell into the judges.
Not again. Yes, Corydon's javelin is bent.
The boys rubbed oil on Alexander, ready for the wrestling match. Corydon watched Stelios carefully. Something was wrong. He looked too smooth and too oily. Then he thought of a plan. He rubbed Alexander's hands in fat and sand. Alexander moved quickly. He caught Stelios from behind and threw him to the ground. Stelios fell heavily. Alexander jumped on top of him and held him down.
The winner of the wrestling is Alexander of Argos.
The boys decided that the only way to beat Stelios was to work together. On the starting line, Corydon, Midas, and Adonis stood close to Stelios. They put Alexander in the outside lane. The three boys ran so close to Stelios that he couldn't see Alexander. On the finishing line, Alexander dropped his head and just beat Stelios. Alexander was the winner of the boys' pentathlon by 1 point. He stood proudly as the judge put the olive wreath on his head and gave him an olive branch. Everybody was pleased that little Alexander of Argos managed to beat the cheating Stelios. That night, they all celebrated in style, all except Stelios.